There are moments in life when everything goes quiet. Not the quiet of a room without noise, but the silence of something deeper, something unsettling. It often happens in midlife, though few of us name it aloud. The kids are grown or gone. The career that once defined us begins to feel like a well-worn suit 2 sizes too small. There's a quiet panic under the surface, the gnawing question, is this all there is? It's in this void, this invisible ache, that Terence McKenna's voice begins to echo, not as a guru or a prophet, but as a reminder. He once said, "Culture is not your friend." That's a hard thing to hear when you've spent decades building a life shaped by culture, by expectations, by work, by doing what's right. But McKenna wasn't trying to criticize. He was pointing to something many of us feel but rarely articulate, that much of what we've been told to value might not be real. There's a kind of psychological exhaustion that sets in around the age of 45 and beyond. You've played the game, you've said yes when you wanted to say no, you've chased security over mystery, and now you feel it, the small death of wonder. McKenna believed that wonder wasn't a childish phase but a biological necessity, that our consciousness was wired not just for survival, but for exploration, internal and external. His best-kept secret wasn't hidden in conspiracy or mysticism. It was hidden in plain sight. That reality is not what we've been told it is. And if you listen closely, that silence you've been hearing, it's not emptiness, it's an invitation. He challenged us to question what we think of as normal. He saw modern life, especially in the West, as a slow hypnosis. Television, routine, consumption, and even our conversations, he argued, lull us into a kind of waking sleep. But that sleep is dangerous. Because while you're asleep, you miss your own life. This is not a call to abandon responsibility or renounce your relationships. It's a call to feel again, to remember that you were once a being filled with curiosity, hunger, and awe. The secret, the one McKenna whispered through lectures and late-night interviews, is that you still are. You've just been conditioned to forget. So if you're feeling the tug, that low-frequency ache of something more, don't dismiss it. That's not weakness. It's not failure. That's your psyche waking up. That's your intuition rising above the noise. That's the beginning of a very old remembering. And McKenna, wild-haired and wide-eyed, would look at you now and say, "Welcome back." Terence McKenna didn't mince words when he said, "What civilization is 6 billion people trying to make themselves happy by standing on each other's shoulders and kicking each other in the teeth." It's a brutal image, but if you've spent decades in the American workforce, climbing, negotiating, sacrificing, you might feel the truth in it. The culture we live in sells us the idea that fulfillment lies just one rung higher. The next raise, the better home, the more obedient body, the smarter phone. And yet, despite all the upgrades, something remains missing. For those in midlife and beyond, this is no longer just a philosophical question. It's a lived reality. You begin to see through the illusion, not because you're cynical, but because you've tasted it all and the flavor no longer satisfies. What McKenna argued was that this restlessness isn't a flaw. It's the beginning of awakening. He often spoke of culture as a mass hallucination, not because it's false in every sense, but because it's selective. It teaches us what to see, what to value, what to ignore. From childhood, we're trained to focus on productivity, obedience, appearances. But no one teaches us how to deeply perceive, how to question the assumptions we inherit. By our 40s and 50s, we carry the psychological weight of roles that have solidified: mother, provider, manager, caregiver, retiree in training. We wear these like uniforms, but who were you before you put them on? Who are you beneath them? McKenna believed that culture's most dangerous lie is that it makes us forget we have access to direct experience, that you can, at any moment, question the script and ask, is this my truth or someone else's expectation? There's something deeply American about this too. The promise of freedom, individuality, and self-determination. But in practice, many find themselves trapped in silent conformity. The velvet bars are soft, but they are still bars. Comfort can become a prison. Predictability can become a trance. He urged people not to rebel destructively, but to subvert creatively. To become what he called psychedelic outlaws, not necessarily through substances, but through perception, through curiosity, through waking up to the constructed nature of what we call normal. This isn't about abandoning society, it's about re-entering it with eyes wide open. So ask yourself, when was the last time you looked at your life and your routines, your beliefs, even your memories, and questioned which parts were genuinely yours? The parts that still feel alive? The parts that whisper beneath the noise? Midlife gives us that chance to stop running, to stop climbing, and to start listening, not to what society demands, but to what the soul remembers. McKenna wasn't offering escape. He was offering liberation. But it starts by realizing that the cage we're in looks an awful lot like home. Terence McKenna's work is often associated with psychedelics, not for their recreational use, but for their revelatory potential. He believed these substances acted as mirrors, reflecting back the hidden architecture of the self and the collective illusions we live inside. But for those who've never had a psychedelic experience or have no intention of trying one, his message still resonates, because the real subject wasn't the substance, it was the perception. McKenna said, "What psychedelics do is pull the plug on the illusion. In everyday life, that illusion can look like the stories we tell ourselves to keep moving. I'm fine. It's too late to change. This is just the way things are." These scripts become emotional autopilot, especially in midlife when decades of compromise, responsibility, and routine accumulate like layers of fog over our original self. But what if clarity isn't as far away as it seems? McKenna's core insight was this: you don't have to take something to wake up. You just have to look honestly. And that might be more difficult than any substance-induced vision. It means confronting the small betrayals we've accepted as normal. It means seeing our fears not as enemies, but as outdated maps. It means daring to ask, what if I've been living someone else's dream? That question hits hard for many people over 45. By this age, you've likely faced some loss of a loved one, a role, a dream deferred. These experiences strip away the surface layers of life. They reveal what McKenna would call the felt presence of immediate experience, the raw now. And once you touch that, you can't go back to pretending everything's fine. He often described psychedelics as tools for deconditioning, for peeling away the artificial layers of identity. But you can do this with inner work, with meditation, with honest reflection, with difficult conversations, with stillness, and perhaps most of all, with courage. The courage to admit you don't have it all figured out. The courage to question beliefs you've carried for decades. The courage to grieve not just people, but past versions of yourself. These too are psychedelic acts, not in the chemical sense, but in the psychological one. McKenna's message to those in midlife wasn't drop out. It was drop in. Drop into your own being. Into your forgotten instincts, into the mystery that still pulses under the routines. You may not see kaleidoscopic visions or hear voices from another dimension, but you will begin to remember something vital, that your life is not a series of obligations to be completed, but a question to be lived. And if you can live that question, openly, honestly, imperfectly, you're already walking the path McKenna pointed to. A path where clarity replaces control and presence replaces performance. You don't need a mirror made of mushrooms. You just need the willingness to see. If you sit quietly, truly quietly for long enough, a strange thing begins to happen. The mental chatter, the to-do lists, the inner critic, all begin to fade. At first, what emerges is discomfort, restlessness, anxiety. But if you stay a little longer, something else begins to surface. A voice that isn't frantic, isn't rehearsed. It's slow, ancient, familiar. That's the voice McKenna wanted us to hear. He often said that Western culture had outsourced its sense of meaning, trading inner knowing for institutional authority, religion, media, education. These aren't inherently bad, but they become dangerous when we forget we ever had an internal compass to begin with. And by the time many people reach their 40s or 50s, they've stopped listening for that inner signal entirely. Not out of ignorance, but because the outer world is so loud. In American life especially, noise is everywhere. News, screens, appointments, alerts, even our attempts to relax, podcasts, streaming, social media, become more content, more input. There's no room for the whisper underneath, but that whisper is where your deepest wisdom lives. McKenna didn't just encourage silence, he demanded it in a way. Not silence as escape, but as doorway. He called language both a blessing and a curse, a way to name reality, but also a way to distort it. How many of us have used words to hide, to defend, to explain away the truth of what we're really feeling? He invited people to drop beneath the words, not into emptiness, but into direct experience. What are you actually sensing? What does your body know that your brain won't admit? What grief have you never named? What longing have you silenced for years? These are not comfortable questions, but they are necessary ones, especially in midlife, when the soul no longer tolerates half-truths. The pain you feel now isn't weakness, it's resistance to your own awakening. It's the cost of avoiding your voice in favor of the world's, and yet, it's never too late to reclaim it. McKenna urged us to become archaeologists of the soul, unearthing buried truths not by thinking harder, but by listening deeper. For some, that happens in nature. For others, in therapy. For many, it comes in the quiet hours before dawn, when the mask slips and something raw rises. He wasn't just talking about introspection, he was talking about homecoming, a return to the original voice inside you, the one that's been speaking all along, beneath the scripts and expectations. When was the last time you heard it? That voice may not give you answers, but it will remind you of the questions that still matter, the ones you forgot to ask while trying to hold everything together. And once you begin to listen again, something sacred happens. You stop trying to be someone else. You start becoming yourself, fully, finally, without apology. One of Terence McKenna's most radical and unsettling ideas was this: time is not linear. We've been taught to experience life as a straight line from birth to death, from past to future, measured in milestones: school, career, marriage, children, retirement. But McKenna saw time differently. To him, time was more like a spiral, full of patterns, echoes, returns. And for anyone in midlife or beyond, that idea may feel surprisingly accurate. Because despite everything we've achieved, there are moments when the past visits us, not as memory but as feeling. You walk into a room and remember a version of yourself you thought you'd outgrown. You hear a song and feel the ache of a moment from decades ago. Time folds. And in that fold you realize you're still carrying parts of yourself you thought were lost. McKenna believed this folding of time wasn't just poetic, it was essential to healing. When we see time as a straight line, we believe our past is gone. But when we see it as a spiral, we understand something deeper. The past is not over. It's living inside us, asking for integration. This can feel overwhelming. In American culture, there's enormous pressure to move on, to stay positive, to reinvent. But what if the real work isn't moving on, but returning to what was left behind? Not to get stuck in it, but to retrieve what's still true. Midlife offers us a rare opportunity. With fewer illusions and more perspective, we're finally able to see our past selves with compassion instead of judgment. We understand why we made the choices we did, even the ones that hurt. We see the trauma not as failure, but as adaptation. And in that clarity, we can begin to release the shame we've carried silently for years. McKenna's concept of novelty, the idea that time accelerates as consciousness evolves, fits perfectly here. What if midlife is not a plateau but a quickening? What if all the emotions, regrets, and longings that resurface now aren't signs of regression, but signals that you're ready for integration? He wasn't interested in nostalgia, he was interested in reconciliation. He believed that by revisiting the past through a new lens, we don't just understand ourselves better, we become whole. So ask yourself, what parts of your younger self have you buried? What dreams, what fears, what instincts? They're still there, and they're not childish, they're clues. Breadcrumbs leading back to a version of you that was unfiltered, curious, alive. Time is not a race toward decay, It's a spiral toward depth. The further you go, the more you are invited to return, not to who you were, but to what you forgot in the process of becoming who you were told to be. McKenna would say, "The universe is stranger than we suppose, but kinder than we imagine. And perhaps so is you, when you finally allow all of yourself to exist in this moment." By the time many of us reach midlife, a quiet dullness can set in. Not because life has been empty, but because repetition has eroded the edges of meaning. We know the script. We've played our roles. And somewhere along the way, the world lost its color. It became practical, predictable, manageable. But Terence McKenna argued that the greatest tragedy of modern life isn't chaos, it's banality, a kind of spiritual numbness that creeps in when wonder is replaced by routine, and mystery is flattened into facts. He called for a re-enchantment of reality, not by escaping life, but by seeing it differently. To McKenna, the universe was not a machine, but a living, breathing mystery. Every tree, every pattern, every strange coincidence was a whisper from something deeper. But to hear it, we have to slow down, we have to learn to see again. This isn't easy, especially in the United States, where productivity is prized, and idleness often feels like failure. We're trained to value output, not awareness. But what if the most valuable thing we can do at this stage in life is look closer? That cup of coffee in the morning, that moment of sunlight on your face, the way a memory can rise from nowhere and leave you teary-eyed. These aren't distractions, they're the point. McKenna believed that when we fully inhabit the moment, even the most ordinary parts of life become sacred. He often spoke of the felt presence of immediate experience, a fancy phrase for something incredibly human. The aliveness that comes when we stop trying to control everything and start noticing what's already here, not what we should be doing. Not who we should be, just what is. And what is right now might be messy, you might be grieving, you might feel lost, you might be uncertain about your future, your purpose, your relationships. But McKenna's lens offers something radical. The idea that even this, the confusion, the discomfort, contains beauty if you can stay with it long enough to see beneath the surface. Re-enchantment doesn't mean ignoring the hard parts of life. It means refusing to let them define the entire picture. It means recognizing that there is still awe to be found, not just in distant places or profound experiences, but in the breath, the gaze, the silence. It means asking yourself each day, what did I overlook today that was quietly miraculous? McKenna believed the world is not what we've been told, and neither are we. You are more than a role, more than a routine. You are a perceiver of mystery, a participant in wonder, a witness to things that have no name. And if you can reclaim that vision, even in brief flashes, then the enchantment isn't gone, it's just been waiting for you to wake up, to look up, to remember. There's something bittersweet about reaching the second half of life. You've seen enough to know how fragile things are, how quickly the years move, how quietly dreams change shape. There's a kind of wisdom that only comes through living, and a kind of sorrow too. But McKenna believed that this phase of life wasn't an ending, it was an unveiling. All along he insisted that the greatest secret, the one hidden beneath culture, noise, time and fear, wasn't something out there. It was you, not the self shaped by society, not the self molded by duty or fear, but the authentic, mysterious, creative force that has lived inside you since the very beginning. The self that still dreams, still wonders, still knows there is more. McKenna spoke often about the divine spark within each person, not in religious terms, but in experiential ones. He believed that we are not passive observers of reality, but co-creators. That your consciousness is not a side effect of biology, but a participant in the unfolding of the universe itself. That your life, with all its detours and scars, is not a mistake, but a work of art still being formed. And in this way, the best-kept secret in the world isn't psychedelic. It isn't esoteric. It isn't even hidden. It's been in your breath, your memory, your grief and your laughter this entire time. It's in the way you've kept going, in the way you still care, in the way you long for something more even now. That longing, it's not a flaw, it's a compass. For those aged 45 and up, especially in the fast-paced culture of the United States, It can feel like the world is rushing forward without you, as if relevance is tied to youth and wisdom is too quiet to matter. But McKenna would challenge that idea. He'd say that the second half of life isn't about fading, it's about deepening. Not outward growth, but inward expansion. Not proving yourself, but becoming yourself, finally, without compromise. So what do you do now with this awareness? You slow down, you listen, you create, you forgive, you sit in silence more often, you let go of what no longer resonates, you say no without guilt. You follow curiosity without apology, and you begin to trust that life still has mysteries left, not in some faraway place, but in your own heart. McKenna believed that when enough people awaken to this inner truth, the world itself changes. Not through revolution, but through resonance, through thousands, millions of individuals who are no longer sleepwalking, but remembering. And now it's your turn. To not just think differently, but see differently. To not just survive, but feel again. To not just get through the day, but touch the infinite in your own quiet, unrepeatable way. Because the best-kept secret in the world was never really a secret. It was you. It's always been you. It's